Welcome to the Armada podcast with your host, Kalorn.
I don't really find any of the other three ISDs to be all that useful in a post 1.5 post Onager world.
Fox Omega.
I don't think it does enough to guarantee you're not going to get absolutely throttled by a well planned out squad heavy fleet.
And Juliet Whiskey.
This is like the third or fourth time everybody's been like, hey, arcs, they're amazing. We're talking about a different set of arcs, right? Not my arcs, not my Republic arcs.
And now, the Armada podcast.
And welcome to episode 4 of the Armada podcast. This week we continue with where we left off last week with Truthiness and part 2 of our episode on how to fix Armada. Without further ado, let's get back to the action. That takes us to topic 3 of the night, which honestly I kind of expect this one to be the most controversial of the ones that we talk about, and that's point defense ion cannons. And I have to tell you, Truthy, that since I realize I've only been playing the game since the SSD came out, but I have not seen a single card in this game see as much wild, just absolute speculation and hatred or love of one card in the game since this one came out.
Yeah, okay. I kind of veer on the side of it really doesn't scare me. You know, it's a little annoying for fighters, but it's there. But I mean, I get the. I mean,
I don't disagree with you, Truthy. It's just, what intrigues me about this is just how polarized the community becomes about PDIC.
Oh, I think it's not even polarized. I think the community almost universally hates it. It's considered an auto include by so many people in that slot because it's so cheap. 4 points. And just that extra little fighter protection. I bet you if you add it up over the course of the game, it's probably pretty significant. If you're facing Sloan, if you're a Sloan player, I completely understand why you hate this card. Whoa, boy, do I understand.
So, Fox, where were we at in the game before PDIC came out? And why do you think this card was put together and included in the way it was?
It's interesting because like the need for the card or like the slot in particular in that Ion slot has kind of flip-flopped the entire time I've played. So when I first came in, first player was still a very, very big deal. You had BT boarding trooper Avenger combos where first player Kuats could just wipe things off the table, and PDIC doesn't really help with that. I guess you could peel off PDIC at this point, but and then things kind of shifted, and second player became stronger because we had new objectives come out with these new campaign expansions, and so people could leverage objectives a little bit harder. Then Sloan came into popularity. Like Truthy said earlier, 2-ship was a big thing. And so like the need for the card arose again. And then people couldn't, it got to the point where if you wanted to really be competitive, you had to bring squads. I know Truthy has an opinion about this. In fact, we used your hot take on the last episode. But it got to the point where you had to bring squads if you wanted to be competitive. Well, we started to see some fleets in this last Vassal World Cup, like Paul's fleet, where you could use PDIC as your squad defense, and you were kind of fine. You could you didn't need all the rerolls that something like leading shots afforded you. You didn't need the extra dice out the side like high capacity ion turbines offered you. Maybe you didn't even need a blue crit. Like HIEs offered. PDIC was a great way to go about going squadless.
Well, I mean, then you also bring up a good point, Fox, that the rise of PDIC is also tied to the downfall, or not the downfall, but the increase in price in leading shots itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Truth.
I still don't think you can do squadless. Like I think what some of these lists do, like Sam's Las Vegas and Vassal World Cup fleets, yes, they're using PDIC, but he's not just using PDIC. He's using projection experts and super repair interdictors, and just like I would still not be comfortable going into it, into a tournament completely squadless with just PDIC to save me. That is entirely praying to the dice gods that they save you, and I've been there. It doesn't work.
No, yeah, I agree with you, and I know I'm in the minority.
Fox has already angered the dice gods. Let me just put it that way. I
constantly anger them. But I agree with you, and in fact, I'm in the minority of players. I feel like Kellorn was saying earlier, I feel like there's a lot of vitriol about this card. I think it's fine. I don't think it does enough to guarantee you're not going to get absolutely throttled by a well planned out squad heavy fleet. I don't think it does enough, and so I don't understand the absolute negative opinions about it. I do get that it like takes up a slot because it's so cheap. I get that, but people wanting it out of the game, like I think that's silly.
Oh yeah, I definitely wouldn't go that far, but it is just too cheap. Like I've kind of looked at some lists where I've looked at SW7 seriously on like an ISD2, and
SW7s are awesome.
Yeah, except that they're a point more than these, and you'll probably get more benefit out of PDIC. So the proposal that I sent to the guys around to you guys is just simple, easy increase to 8 points. Now you're talking into heavy ion emplacement range. It's well beyond, leading shots, which, leading shots still might not be, taken as much as it used to be because there's just so many more dice fixing options these days. But I think it's more appropriate for what it does, and it makes you think seriously on whether you want to bring it in. And suddenly you only have one ship covered for that cost instead of two. I think that'll help.
Julie, Whiskey, did you want to hop in on PDIC here before we close up?
Nope. I just want to make sure that nobody comes after Fox. Look, he's a bold man, he's a brave man, and he makes passionate statements. So please leave Fox be.
I'm actually kind of on Fox's side on this one. I find PDIC to be annoying, but I don't find it to be game breaking. Then again, I guess one of the things I enjoy about PDIC is watching how it shifts the meta and how it has changed people's opinion about certain squads and how many more 2 dice bombers we see in response.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, say hello to all the fire sprays that we have entering into the meta that everyone just kind of poo-pooed on 2 years ago. Now they're everywhere and people lean on them. Arcs are one of the most beautiful squadrons ever designed. I think they're the greatest squadron in the game. Yeah, I said it. And I could not be happier with what this card does for their viability.
Hold on. Wait a minute. This is like it's totally to just grab the steering wheel and drive this thing off the road. This is like the 3rd or 4th time everybody has been like, hey, arcs, they're amazing. We're talking about a different set of arcs, right? Not my arcs, not my Republic arcs, not my slow, snail-paced arcs. Am I missing something?
You got to run
yes.
the fighter control teams, and you'll be much happier.
Yes, there you go. Fighter control teams.
Fighter control teams, peltas, and arcs, and you'll be very happy.
There you go. You got it.
I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. Go for it, Truthy. All yours.
Any further questions? Yeah, pelta, fighter control teams, spam repair. Anything else?
All right, I'm going to try it.
Bring you Lauren and make your opponents cry.
You Lauren.
Truthy, if it doesn't happen, I got a combatives mat at my house, right?
Oh, all right. There we go. It sounds like a good time. Yeah, I already have a deal that, so I'll give you a slight preview. John, Geek inspired a ridiculous idea for a song based on you, Lauren. Yes, a song. The deal is, if I win Nova, I have to sing it on my podcast. It is awful. You will have to hear me sing. I'm sorry
what is
if
with
that
this
happens.
singing on your podcast, by the way? Like, I don't understand. How did that all get started?
I love it.
Biggs is a terrible singer, and we love laughing at him singing. I don't think there's really anything more to that.
No, that's false. Biggs is a fantastic singer. I can't believe you would say that about him.
Biggs will tell you he is tone deaf, and yeah, he's tone deaf. And it is a glorious mess.
I actually have sung in like professional choirs before, but I am not going to sing on my podcast. Sorry, guys.
Well, now I'm going to have to coax it out of you at some point. So
I was about to say, I heard that's a challenge.
Do it.
Taking notes.
So the next topic here is specifically about black dice crit effects, and I want to frame this discussion a little bit in the kind of the, I don't want to say downfall, but we've gotten away from people bidding for first, and we often see people bidding for second in the game. And I feel like the combination of the 1.5 changes to the game and specifically these black dice crit effects and the fact that they exhaust and a little bit of PDIC in the game has changed the way that we look at taking first player and playing ships that rely on black dice crit effects. So I guess, Truthy, my question to you to start off the discussion is, did 1.5 and PDIC go too far in nerfing first player in Armada?
I don't think first player, but I will say I think 1.5 went a little too far with the black dice crit effects. I still think first player is perfectly valuable. You can still get some great combos out of doing it. There's value in having, to know your ship is safe. And I think you can see in a lot of tournaments, the ones that are succeeding are often not the ones bidding hard. Like you look at Mac at Gen Con, he didn't bid at all. He was perfectly happy going first or second, if I remember correctly. And he played first and second player.
But I bid hard and went for second and trashed people. So
yeah. But what I'm saying is, I think the list that you see more common are the ones that are perfectly happy going first or second. You even talked to Sam about his. He had a bid for his Las Vegas Open, and while he had one, he ended up being perfectly happy with first player a lot of times because there's still an advantage to it. Yes, second player is probably stronger than it used to be, but it used to be you did not take second player at one point in this game. You want first player, period, end of story. You're just going to be at a disadvantage if you don't. So I don't think 1.5, nerfed first player. I think what you look at I'm looking at specifically with the black dice things is relative value. If you're filling the slot, you get more value out of external Rex than you do either of the crit effects. And that comes down to the fact that it really, more than anything, it's the evade change. APT and ACM used to haunt small ships because they just couldn't survive it, especially APT. Oh man, forget about it. And now that you've got an evade to be able to force rerolls on hit crits that, you need to proc ACM and APT, there's so many fewer ships that are really haunted by those upgrades that now the slot is just occupied by external racks.
You say funny words, Magic Man. I need some help here. All right, this is for the class.
Yeah, fire away.
What was the change? What happened in 1.5 that has caused this conversation to even happen?
Yeah, sure. So evade used to only work at medium and long range. At medium range was the reroll, and long range was a canceled die. At close range, evade used to do absolutely nothing. You've got a whole bunch of small ships that have that evade, that have a defense against assault concussion missiles and assault proton torpedoes to force what is often a single hit crit to get rerolled, and 75% of the time it's going to be either a hit or a blank. So it really kind of kills the value of that thing that needs to trigger off of a critical when you can't rely on the critical like you used to.
Well, and then they doubled down and made those crit effects exhaust.
Yeah, and I think that's, and I've kind of talked with a few people that really, really kind of used to use it a lot, and if it didn't exhaust, there's a place in it, I think, for hunting larges especially. Because larges, yes, some will have PDIC, but there are plenty of larges that won't, and we're also pairing this with a PDIC point increase, to give you a chance to get 2 of these crit effects on a large ship, turn them into those whale hunter upgrades. And frankly, this day and age in where the game is, I think it's okay to reward black dice ships again, because they're not really in a good place right now.
No, I feel it. So I think it's an excellent solution as far as like making them more about like if you remove the exhaust, they become large. They become targets for larges. When in my Dooku fleet, I played a lot of Ion Storm, and the second I saw a large across from me, I knew that was my primary target because I knew I could proc that crit from long, and they couldn't do anything. I was just gonna reap those benefits over and over and over again. Even with PDIC, I think you still get to proc that crit at close more often than not, because the vessels that you're putting those upgrades on have more than 2 black dice or 3 black dice. You're putting it on MC30s, you're putting it on gladiators, you're putting it on Kuats, things that can get a lot more black dice in one go. I think the combination of the evade change plus PDIC is really what did it. And then adding the exhaust as well really it just made it a wet diaper, that whole black die crit situation.
Yeah, so why bother? Just take external Rex, get your 2 dice on what is probably going to be your only pass at black range anyway, and get something out of the slot. 4 points versus that, or 4 points for APT. I mean, you're going to take external Rex, just unless you are committed to proving a point.
Plus, it's flexible against squadrons. External Rex is so good right now, but finding a way to bring back those black die crits, yeah.
So we saw they did increase the points on external Rex, right, Truthy?
Yeah, it went up from 3 to 4, and then ACM and APT both came down. What was ACM? I think ACM was
7.
ACM was 6.
7. So it came down 2 points. APT was 5. It came down to 4. I honestly think, based on PDIC being in the game, evades being in the game, I don't think you even need to increase the points back. I think you can just strip off the exhaust and keep it as it was, because I still think there's an argument to be made that external Rex is probably still going to be more valuable.
That was going to be my question: is do you pair this with an increase in price to external Rex? Another increase?
Maybe. I think I'm very cautious with any kind of things like this. I like incremental stuff. I think you just strip back the exhaust first, see where we end up. If it feels like a good place, keep it. If it doesn't, then tweak external Rex a little bit. And then what I'm worried about is then if you just up external Rex and ACM and APT still aren't good, you just end up with ordnance slots, empty.
Yeah, and the fact that external Rex is a discard effect, I think that filling up a slot that with a card that just goes away after one use, whereas if APT and ACM are no longer exhaust, even if you're attacking something with an evade, at least you're burning their evade, because they got to use it twice if you've got a double arc on them. Like there's a little bit more of broader strategy around that.
Okay, so random question related to black dice: who's the best officer on Demolisher?
Montferrat.
Callus.
I see. I would go with Iden Versio.
Nah, I want that on a Raider.
No, I've already got it on a Raider.
I don't take Raiders, so I'm taking Iden on my depot.
Well, that's why you're wrong. So
No, I think this is the same reason I like Kraken. Montferrat helps you against salvos. Especially if you're double arcing and you're going up against Starhawk that wants to salvo you twice with its freaking local fire control. Montferrat takes away 2 dice from those salvos, which can be, and then you can evade as well to potentially mitigate more damage.
See, I enjoy Iden because I can stick demo in the front arc of something nasty like an Imperial Star Destroyer and lean into the evade and probably survive the one time I have to be I like Iden as playing demo as second player, because then I can guarantee that it survives the shot that it needs to take before it's going to do its damage, and then it can run away.
Yeah, but I can do that with Montferrat too.
Yeah, like I said, I think I do think it's interesting, and we came up with 3 different answers deliberately.
I get where Fox is going too. It sounds like he wants to say something about Callus, because I know exactly what he's talking about.
yeah, I think there's something to be said about a flexible use for a Demolisher right now, or just for a Gladiator period, because I think it can't be used as a cruise missile like it used to be. It used to be you could throw it in there and it's going to delete something, ironically, with what we're talking about, black die crits. Now it has to be used a little bit more cautiously, and I think putting Callus in there on a Glad 2, you get a lot of flexibility in flak, and it's one of the best flak boats in the game, in my opinion, especially if it's got Gasp X-Rax on it. The fact that you could throw 5 dice at a single named squadron is absolutely huge. Saber just disappears. So I think the flexibility that Callus offers is huge. But I see where y'all are coming from too.
Oh yeah, and I've seen that use, and it's solid. It's and I do like it a lot. Good old Callus flak boat. It's seen use at Worlds. Like I think Norm took it at one point. Norm's been like up there. I think he won Worlds one year. Yeah, he was the Canadian that won Worlds. He used it the last Worlds as well as that demo flak boat with Callus before there was an ace cap. It's good. It's really good with external racks. And man, I'll tell you what, I still haven't entirely adjusted to demo in this 1.5 world. Like I was playing against Gilad Pelion. He's a local around here, and man, he rolled up on a Pelta with a demo, and I'm clenching, thinking, okay, there goes my Pelta, because I've still got it in my head that demo is this arch predator, and he APTs, and I scatter the APT, and then brace, and I take a grand total of 2 damage, and then the Pelta goes, and it immediately repairs that 2 damage, and I just have realized that I've watched demo just bounce off of a Pelta. And I was just I'm still processing that even happened.
I assume you mean evade and not scatter.
Did I say scatter? Yes, I meant evade. Thank you for correcting me yet again tonight.
And that's what I'm talking about. Is I think demo needs a little bit more flexibility now. I won LSO with that build with a Callus X-Rax Glad 2, and you cannot use it in that way anymore. I don't think you can, because of all these changes we're talking about tonight. Like,
you do have to be more conservative with it, I think, and I think the flak boat's a good way to get some value out of it. Being able to move and then use blue flak, and blue flak, you don't have Tauren in the Imperial faction to make it really reliable, but 2 dice on blue, it's pretty good, especially if you can have Callus adding in a black there or whatever you need.
Well, and not only that, but you don't lose a lot of anti-ship functionality. Like, you got Ordnance Experts, you got X-Rax on it. Like, you're still going to hit pretty hard, so.
Alrighty, well, I think then we get into our last hot take of the evening, and that's that Truthy, our Imperial Star Destroyer is bad?
Yes. I'm going to parrot Boba Fett a lot here, because I do largely agree with his takes on this. I think the Imperial faction is...
Look, we don't talk about Boba Fett on this podcast.
Matt's a good dude. I I've met Matt, and he really is a good dude. I agree with him in this regard. Is that Imperial list building is just so very restrictive, it feels. And if you're going to nerf the Onager, I think all that really does is just kind of knock Imperials down a peg and doesn't really give them much to fall back on. And the once mighty ISD has been largely displaced by the Onager in Imperial list building. So I'd like to see the ISD have a slight tweak along with the Onager coming down a peg.
So wait. Okay, I'm back with the rest of the class. We're confused. We're lost. Where is this coming from? Again, why is this a conversation? Is it just what?
Oh man, I talk with Matt all the time on Discord about this kind of stuff. I've had chat with him. What? Yeah. Anyway, I've talked with Robo a lot, and he and I talk one-on-one. We talk in some other private Discords. I think we've talked a little bit about this in some open Discords as well. I think that's really all where it's come from.
Right, but I guess what Julia Whiskies is getting into is just like, what is the aspect of the ISD that has become so difficult to deal with?
Oh, I think it's something. Yeah, I got you. So I think it's something that you can see in a lot of the older large ships is they just don't stack up with the later ones. The Starhawk and the Onager, they are so much better than the other larges in the factions, I think. Man, the MC-80 in particular looks like some age, and I'd love to eventually get there, but this is supposed to be a nice small tweak thing, and I think the Rebels in general are still kind of got a good deal of variability to their list building.
I assume you're talking about the HMC-80 because I honestly feel like the Liberty type is fantastic still.
I think the Liberty's solid, and I think it's another ship that's held up largely by Agate, because I don't really like Radis all that much anymore. He kind of in the latest in one point, and since his change for Wave 8's errata, but you're right. The Liberty is still very solid, but you look at like the Home 1 variant and the ISD came out at the same time. They both kind of just show their age compared to, the Starhawk and the Onager, and then you start looking at the larges that come for the droids and the clones. They kind of just show their age, in my opinion.
So, I mean, I agree that there are some issues with ISDs in general, but honestly, I feel like the ISD-2 is still maybe the most well-rounded ship in the game, but that doesn't do anything for the fact that I don't really find any of the other three ISDs to be all that useful in a post 1.5 post Onager world.
Oh man, the Simoon got put out of a job real bad. Like that used to be the ship that haunted the dreams of Smalls, with gunnery teams and splatting 2 Smalls with 7 red dice from downtown. That thing was a nightmare. And man, it is completely out of a job right now.
The Simoon is the Scruffy the janitor of the Imperials. It really it appears once every 20 episodes, and it doesn't really do very well at all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then you got the Kuat that it has the same black dice problems we've been talking about. The ISD-1 has been maligned by everybody except for Mac since it's existed. It's part of the reason that Tua exists. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with the ISD-2. ISD-2, I think, is still okay. I think I still would like to tweak all of them a little bit, and we'll get into the idea.
So let's talk about that a second, Truthy. I mean, we this I think had a whole bunch of ideas getting thrown out there. You talked about adding a natural salvo for every on every one of the chassis, specifically by replacing the contain. What was your basis there, and why do you feel like the contain should have to go?
So, I don't like the idea of taking away the double redirect, for one. So it's just kind of part of how the ship is, and I think it makes it look like, the natural evolution of a ship from the Clone Wars into the Galactic Civil War period. The single defense tokens are a obvious intentional weakness of the Clone Wars ships, and I like that the ISD and the home one have double redirects. And I would say a salvo kind of has a huge value to it, that really fits the ISD, in my opinion. You're thinking about the pinnacle of large ships in this universe. It's the big staple of Star Wars is the ISD. Should be big, scary, the pinnacle of technology. And I think the salvo really reflects that. And the reason I think it comes at the cost to contain is, it's a big pinnacle of technology, but man, on screen, crit effects are not kind to that ship. So that's kind of the logic there in universe is, you have the salvo to kind of give it a little more oomph. I think it really helps the Kuat in particular. When it gets up close, it doesn't have to rely entirely on dive, double arc, and then get out of there. If it's taking some shots while it's in brawling range, that's helping its damage output.
So I one of the things I was looking at here is just, I've played quite a bit of ISD2 with local fire control and specifically flat cannons. And I really like the way that a salvo works on an ISD, but what I'm not so sure about is giving it a salvo and then allowing it to keep that weapons team slot open. So what do you think might be some potential unintended consequence of giving it a native salvo and allowing it to say something like gunnery teams or gunnery chief Farnillian?
I'm not really worried about it, to be completely honest. The intent is very much to step up that power level. Gunnery teams took a nerf. It's already harder to use. You got to feed it that concentrated fire in some way, shape, or form. So I don't think I'm really too concerned about it. But yeah, I mean, I can obviously be wrong. And having salvo combined with gunnery teams could be really nasty. I think I'm probably more scared of a Kuat Vader having salvo as well. That could be a big problem of you don't have to choose between local fire control and Vader. You've got both now. So yeah, there's some combos in there, but I think for what the ISD costs, and at the cost of taking away that contain, because yeah, it's an underappreciated defense token, not taking a critical. So you are taking some value away and making that local fire control team free, essentially.
Honestly, that the Kuat Vader boarding team was the very first build that I thought of when I saw this proposal of yours, because we're seeing local fire control all over the place on ISDs, and I think for good reason. Like, they have fairly good rear arcs that at least match some of the better rear arcs that are out there. If you take that on a Kuat that's already jumping in there, people are already trying to shoot at it, and you give it the opportunity to salvo back and do what it did, 3 years ago by stripping off thermals with Vader boarding team, I think you may see quite a shift in Killer and what you were talking about earlier about the prevalence of pushing for second player. I think we start to see a push for first with Imperials, honestly, because that's a very, very potent combo that a Venator would very much not like,
Yeah, but at the same time, it's not like good old school BT Avenger, boarding troop just blast you to hell. Because it's not that level. And as somebody who I guess dealt with that and played around that, I guess that's my threshold, if that makes any sense. Like, as long as we're not there, we're okay. Which, maybe not the best barometer.
So I do want to talk for a second about something that you and I touched on, Truthy, when we were talking through this in the document. And that's that I really feel like the title slot on ISDs is absolutely underused and undervalued. And that's why I feel like if we talk about providing an ISD that can salvo through a title, I enjoy the idea of that, because then not all of your ISDs in a list have salvo, but you can pick one that does.
I mean, yeah, maybe that's something for a future wave. But you're not getting a new title out of just a quick little change thing here like this.
No, I agree, and like I said, it wasn't something that I thought was like a points change or a quick change like we're talking about. But like I said, I feel like that slot gets just so underutilized.
Yeah, it was for the longest time. It was the Avenger slot, and now Avenger isn't there, and I see Devastator every once in a while. It's not cheap. It is pretty nasty when it gets rolling, but and then Relentless, it's there. Nobody really takes it unless it generally tends to be a new player kind of title to help them ease into 3 command ships and picking the appropriate ones at the right times. But as you get more experience with it tends to drop off. I've seen 7 Fleet used. It's and again, that was I want to say that was mostly a Canadian thing with Norm, and I want to say Mac did it a little bit.
Mac did it a lot.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's just a general thing. I think would not be unappreciated for ISDs is some new titles to give them some variability overall.
So before we move on, Julia Whiskey, where are your thoughts on the Salvo? Because you play GAR for the most part, and how do you feel about Salvo becoming more intrinsic to the Civil War factions and not just more of the land of the Clone Wars factions?
Wow, you didn't put me on the spot with that one. I haven't thought that deep into it. Wow. Hold on. God, you've given me a life crisis right now. Wait a minute. Rephrase that question.
What do I do with my hands? What do I do with my hands?
I guess a way to help you lead into this, Joe Whiskey, is how important do you find Salvo to be as an intrinsic part of your ship in the GAR faction?
That's the thing. I don't feel like I'm an average. Well, okay. In the immediate part of saying I don't feel like I'm an average GAR player, I'm probably a very average, if not below average, GAR player. Me personally, Salvo's nice. It's fun. It's cute. But I use it when I'm desperate. I use it when I'm freaking trying to. I'm like, okay, I really want that ship to blow up, and I can't shoot at it anymore. I still got the Salvo though. Let me throw this at it right quick and see if this does the trick. Salvo is not a core part of my personal fleet, but I know there are GAR players out there who build their fleets completely based around Salvo.
Yeah, and I floated this idea around for a little bit, and I have gotten some opposition to it, that some people think it is kind of Salvo is very much the Clone Wars thing, and having Salvo everywhere kind of gives them a little bit of distinction. I think this doesn't undermine it much. It's just the ISD. I'm not talking about putting it on the MC-80 Home 1. I definitely don't think it should go on any of the Rebel ships. It just they don't feel very Salvo-y to me. It's specifically something for the ISD, I think, that I just feel like it's at home. It feels at home on the ISD. And then you've got a bunch of mediums. You've got a couple mediums in the Clone Wars factions that I think it's embedded in so many different layers of the Clone Wars faction that it doesn't undermine it much.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like the identity of an ISD is in the double redirect for me. A lot of what you can do defensively has a lot to do with your double redirect. And so I think giving an ISD, like, I don't think we're going to see a lot of native Salvo plus local fire control on ISDs, because I think you rob an ISD of a lot of its defensive capability in that way. Not like a Providence, where that Providence is already going to melt pretty quick. So might as well go down swinging, kind of a thing. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be fine. And I'd like to see more gunnery team and boarding troopers type things going on in the Imperial faction.
Kellen, I just want to say one thing. You know how you'll be in the middle of a conversation and somebody says something that you've never even had a passing thought about, and then you realize how wrong you are because you haven't even had a passing thought about it? This whole salvo discussion, salvos is just whatever. Salvo, no, not salvos specifically. I know we're talking about ISTs, but salvos have just been whatever. And hearing everybody talk, I'm like, have I just been sleeping on salvos this whole time and not realizing it? So thank you. I appreciate
Yes, you have been sleeping on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have. You definitely have.
That's 3 of that you've been sleeping on salvo. So that kind of concludes our discussion about what we would like to see changed in Armada, and we do have one little more segment here before we wrap it up. But I guess I want to look back as a whole, and Truthy, the thing that struck me the most about the changes that we've been talking about tonight, when you first showed me, was that realistically the changes we're talking about really aren't that big when you look at the entire scope of Armada.
No, they're really not. And that's intentional. I really love where Armada is as a game right now. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm on Discord and I'm in a minority in that opinion, but I just love where the game is right now. And I think just little tweaks here and there, release schedule or not from AMG, I think the game can be in a really good place for quite a while.
Fox, do you think that Armada's in a pretty good spot, or do you think more changes than we talked about tonight are needed to bring it back in line?
Nope. And I think, honestly, some of the changes we discussed, I don't even think we need. I think the game is in a fantastic place. I think there is a more going to tournaments now and seeing the builds that come out that people came up with and that are actually like viable, and you can actually do these types of things. We spoke last week with Jammers about wide area barrage and like how he was able to get success out of that card. And, it was a struggle with scheduling ranges and stuff like that. He talked about wanting to sub it in IST2, but still like that we're in a part of the game where like multiple different fleets are possible in every single faction. I think the game is in an absolutely fantastic place. I agree with Truthy that if you just did like 1 or 2 of these things, you extend the life of the game a long, long time.
Man, I feel like tonight has been basically me and Fox gaming up on Kalor, and it's feeling good.
I got you, man. I'm
okay with that. I'm okay with that. So that leads us to our last segment, and Fox, you're going to lead us on a short, I might add, discussion on the presence of squads in the meta and how it's changed in the last year.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about rapid reinforcements in particular. After that release, things have happened. Things done gone changing. Anakin in a Delta. You had Hera with, I've experienced firsthand just how awful that new interaction is now, and then redone, and how awful, even more awful it is now for me, not for the Hera player. I want to talk about.
I may have been the Hera player in this instance.
You certainly were. I want to talk about the current state of squadrons in the game, how we're all approaching going up against a squadron fleet, and specifically where we think each faction needs to arrive at in short detail, how you would go about planning your fleet around addressing the new squadron heavy fleets that we're seeing coming out right now, because a lot of them are very, very mean.
New and squadron heavy. That what?
No,
what is going on in Texas?
So,
what is going on in Texas? That new squadron heavy is new.
No, that's fair. That's actually really fair. And I mean, last year we were absolutely dominated by Sloaniger, so I'll take that. And the reason why was because not enough people were flying squad heavy. But what I mean is your comment last week that I pulled into the podcast, like ever since Plo was released, Plo Koon the Commander, it might have been that moment. Things have changed where you can drill down a large into nothingness with fewer squad activations than ever before, I believe. And you adding Vader to pair up with Merrick and Jindin, with arcs, there's just a lot going on right now, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and my quote is intentionally hyperbolic, because that's not the only thing. Like, a lot of it is, it's not really any more dangerous right now to be squadless than it was in the past, I guess. I just feel like your options for squadless are a lot more limited. Because to go back to my Worlds run with Radis, I faced 2-ship 3 times in that tournament out of 7 games. The first was my first game. I didn't quite have my rhythm down. And my second 2 games were a straight up 10-1. I took their advanced gunnery. I used some tried and true tactics to get first and last to keep my ship safe. And I used slicer tools to stop critical turns for squadron commands for critical turns. And the way the game was then, that was a viable method. And on top of it, because of how Intel was, a screen didn't really do anything to you anyway. So your method for dealing with squads as squadless was rush them fast, stop the squad commands from happening, blow things up really quick, get a lot of points. You can't do the first last thing nearly as well as you used to with pass tokens now. You can't lean on slicer tools like you used to because of the ready cost. Yeah, you can still do a decent amount of damage with it, but it doesn't feel as safe to me. And then, yeah, the Plo Koon of it all is kind of the nuclear flag. Is I have never been impressed with Plo as a commander, ever. Like, you go up against another squad heavy fleet, he literally does nothing if you can't get a ship out of squadron fight, the squadron to squadron fight, and onto ships. But if everybody else is squadless, the Plo player will have a field day. Just so bad.
So I guess my biggest problem with squads in Armada is not their existence. It's not that people use them. It's not that people take them, and not that they're good. My biggest problem with squads in Armada is that the counter to squads is more squads. And so
No.
That's what I feel like the natural counter to squads is. And that's why I think that, like,
what
CIS
do you mean,
is
going squad heavy versus squad heavy, or you're taking squads in some fashion to mitigate them?
So what I'm saying is, like, if you're like, I'm going to take squads, and I'm going to use my squads to beat up on person X that's not playing squads. Well, now person X in the next game says, okay, well, I'm going to start taking more squads than the guy the first time. So you go back and you're like, well, I lost that squad fight, so I'm going to add more squads the next time. And we end up with this position where the people who are taking squads are off. It's almost nobody's taking less than 100 points of squads.
Oh, now that I completely disagree with. I still am perfectly comfortable taking that mid-level, 50, 60, 70 points of squads. No problem. It's just a different way to learn to fly it. And it's going to be unique to every squad screen. Because of the changes to Intel, it matters. You're buying time for space. So, the key, you'll see some players say this all the time, kill the carriers. It's still very valid. What you're doing when you're outmatched in the squad fight is you're buying for time, or you're trying to kill critical pieces. So, say I've got a CIS screen of Vulture droids. They're backed up with reserve hangar decks. I'm going to either try and screen my ships to make sure you're not getting shots, and or I'm going to go for, say you've got a couple fire sprays in there. I'm going to specifically try and get those fire sprays because they are significantly soft targets because they don't have braces, and they're going to meanwhile do a lot of damage if they're left unchecked. So my goal in the squad fight is not to win. My goal in the squad fight is to buy time and to get the critical pieces that are going to cause me a lot of damage once my squads are gone. And in the meantime, I'm trying to capitalize on the ship fight. You're just pouring fire into the carriers to try and take them out.
I think that last bit you had there was critical. Even though, like Kellorn, what you were saying, maybe you have like a squadron arms race going on. At the core of a lot of squadron fleets or squadron-based fleets, there's going to be one or two specific elements in that grouping that are critical to the success of that squadron fleet working. And so going into, I want to talk about individual factions and how they address it a little bit, but talking about separatists, people like to say separatist 134 doesn't work. I don't think it has to, honestly, because what we're seeing in the ITC, the International Team Championship right now is LTT, Link Turbo Laser Towers, is the most prevalent turbo laser upgrade there. Like if you have 2 copies of it and you've got some red flak, which separatists have out the wazoo, I could single out one of those fire sprays that Truthy was just talking about. I can end in 1 round. And I think as a separatist, you bring enough squads, like Truthy was saying, you bring 4 or 6 vulture droids. They're not that expensive. You have 2 copies of LTT. Those vulture droids and those LTTs are going to do something to neuter the other person's strategy of eliminating you with squadron play. So,
yeah, and what you're describing is something that I've associated with Europe for quite a while, especially the Brits. I've seen a few folks like flip over to LTT CR90s, which makes my brain scream because like TRCs go on CR90s, but it works. I've seen it work where you're focusing hard on the flak portion of the game, and that can be used to support squad heavy. It can be your mitigation technique to try and take out specific squadrons. Like LTT is, I feel like it's just at home on so many of the separatist ships that I think it can be an excellent complement. That's something both the Clone War factions I think do really well is flak. There's a lot of flak that can hurt so much. I am perfectly comfortable in that, that 60-point range with all the factions really. I've got, it's a different composition and it's different tactics, but I think they can all do it.
So, Fox, do you want to talk about individual factions, or you just want to wrap it up here because we've been going for a while?
Well, I mean, Truthy basically summed it all up and put a big bow on it. But I think he's right. Like every faction, if you're bringing 50 to 60 points of squads, and I'm going to bring up the Callous Gladiator real quick again. Like if you've got some kind of plan around, if you haven't reached engagement stage with your opponent's fleet yet, the ship's proper. If you've got some kind of alternative approach to attacking squadrons, utilizing the other way X-Rax can be used, like against squads, I think you're arriving at a good way to approach the meta right now. You need to have a flexible approach with squads. I don't think it necessarily needs to be 134. I think there are plenty of ways to get around it. And I'm seeing some interesting ways too, honestly. So,
I mean,
I want to ask you, Truthy, one thing here before we move move on though. Was Anakin in a Delta 7 as big a change to the game as it feels like, Truthy, or are we overreacting to it?
Oh no, I don't think you're overreacting at all. I think it's just speaking from experience on what Sam and I have done with the Yularen fleet we both love. Anakin was the missing piece of what we wanted to be able to do with that fleet archetype. None of the GAR squadrons really just went out on the offense and just brought the fight to the enemy and just couldn't remove chunks of an enemy squadron ball like Anakin does. Like Luminara and Plo, Plo didn't really do anything to keep your squads around longer. Luminara is very easy, is hard to place properly, and a crafty opponent can get around her. Ahsoka can do some interesting things, bounce around with FCT, but Gar just didn't have the murder ace it really, really needed. And he's expensive. He's really expensive. You're talking, Merrick levels of points, and definitely not Merrick levels of blowing ships up. But man, he is just a perfect piece for Gar, I think, to be competitive in the squad heavy range. And, I think he's just at home in so many different types of wings. I want him in a medium wing. I want him in a light wing. I want him in a heavy wing. I think that doesn't speak so much to Anakin's power so much as just the relative weakness of Gar aces. Like, you can see the point increase between the Galactic Civil War aces and the Clone War aces. Like, they realized how much more valuable aces were, and the cost went up as a result. So I think it's really just more Anakin is solid, and all the rest of them are not, with the exception of Kickback and Axe. But yeah, he was the missing piece that I think that the Gar really needed in the squad game.
There you go, Juliet Whiskey. More advice for your GAR faction.
Yeah, but the problem is the army knocked out a few too many brain cells. So if y'all do go to the next tournament that I am at, don't expect much. Just expect me to at least be there and breathing.
Alrighty. Well, I want to thank you, Truthy, for coming on. We obviously this is going to end up as 2 episodes for those of you who are listening. This is the end of episode 2 that we split this into. But I really appreciate you coming on and sitting down with us for as long as we did.
Hey man, I much appreciate it. It's always fun.
Yeah. So, Truthy, can you share us with your social media stuff and where people can find you on Discord?
Oh man,
and
now I gotta actually look this stuff up. Sadly, so you can find the heart of all of us the stuff we do at blissfullyignorantgaming.com. No spaces anywhere in there. We've started to do a lot more than just Armada. There's links to our Discord on that page. We also do a Blissfully Ignorant Gaming podcast for games that are not Armada, including especially the Drop Universe. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, come over our Discord. We'll talk about it endlessly. And all of our articles for Armada you can find on Cannot Get Your Ship Out. That was part of one of the many mergers that happened that made Blissfully Ignorant Gaming what it is. So most of the writing on the Cannot Get Your Ship Out at this point are myself and Geek, with Biggs, Schmitty, and Snipafist still contributing every once in a while. So blissfullyignorantgaming.com. You can find everything else from there.
So, one of the reasons we made this podcast, Truthy, is to make you guys make more episodes. Because we are so slow.
We are so slow. Part of that is just, I'm an Army major. I barely have any time. Geek's about to have a baby.
Wait. You just spent 2 hours with us tonight.
Dude, I am going to get no sleep tonight because of it. And I'm also on leave. That's the other advantage, is I'm on a week of leave, so I can actually do things I like. And then Biggs is a nurse, so he's usually coming off of 12-hour shifts, overworked and just tired as hell. So getting all 3 of us together is an adventure.
Wait,
Snuggles and DD-214 blanket.
I long for the days that will be mine.
Oh, look, Truthy, I thought that you weren't allowed to have leave over 4th of July. I thought they did away with that after the movie,
Yes, and hey, it's still one of the greatest movies of all time. God bless Independence Day.
God bless Independence Day.
Best movie speech ever. And if you do not play that on the 4th of July, you are un-American.
Well, you heard it here, folks. You'll hear this part of the episode after 4th of July, but I hope everybody has a fantastic holiday if you're in the U.S. And otherwise, I think that does it for the night.
Thank
Thanks
you all
again,
for
Truthy.
showing up.
Thank you for listening to the Armada Podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, keep up with the show on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Armada Podcast. Join us on Discord with the link in the show notes. Until next time.